The Gondwana Link project is really aimed at re-establishing it's awful language, the ecological connectivity across a vast area of land, an incredibly rich portion of the southwest of Australia. It's the oldest exposed landmass on the planet. No glaciers, no volcanism for millions and millions of years. The biological richness that has occurred as a consequence of that is massive. Over the last 100 years, this area has been opened up for agriculture. A lot of it's been cleared, and we've had problems with feral pests. So an area of extraordinary value has been really massively impacted, but our view was not sufficiently that it was beyond recovery. What we're trying to do now is protect those areas that remain, improve the quality of them, improve the conservation status of the large areas of bushland, but then try and actually rebuild all the bits along the way in between the remaining bits, and that is a task that, as I said, has never been undertaken at this scale before, and it's trying to recreate natural systems in a way that hasn't been done before. Just a massively audacious project. It's over 1,000 kilometres from Margaret River to Kalgoorlie, if you like. We use the phrase from the Karri to Kalgoorlie, and it takes in the wet forests of the southwest, the heathlands of the Stirling Ranges into the woodlands of the goldfields, if you like. It's a hugely complex task. It's a little bit like playing God. We're falling way short of what we would like to achieve, but nonetheless I think you'd see that the restoration works that we're currently doing are amongst the most sophisticated and complex that have been undertaken ever. But it's a massive learning journey, and every time it's new lessons are learnt, and we're trying to improve on what we do. So right across the Gondwana Link from Margaret River to Kalgoorlie, there's a range of activities by a range of partners to protect, maintain, restore what is an incredibly valuable bit of country. If you look at the environmental NGO sector, it covers the whole spectrum from the extremely green, ideologically pure, who won't have anything to do with the corporate sector, and they're largely adversarial and they deal in the language of conflict. Greening Australia as an organisation sits at the opposite end of that spectrum. We're very apolitical, and we're becoming much more business focused ourselves. We see the environment as being such an important sector, an industry sector in its own right, that it should be dealt with in that way. It's not something that you look after in your spare time. It's something that you actually get involved in and you engage with professionally. And so ideologically, we're prepared to work with anybody within limits, as long as they're operating within the law. They have a demonstrated commitment to improve practice in the environment, and are prepared to really contribute to the outcomes of the project. We will find ways to work with them constructively. So I guess we're much more flexible in that respect, and our hope, and maybe it's a naive hope, is that by working with other people you influence the way they view the world. We have a company, Shell Development Australia, that internationally has a pretty tarnished reputation in some places, but we've had over 200 of their staff through our projects. They've been very significantly influenced by these projects. They spend quite a bit of time in them, and it changes the way they look at their own organisation, and that can be really quite important, and these people will be managers in the future. So you don't know what impact you're having. So we're prepared to play in that space and play with different partners, government, community, corporate sector, and I think we're very good at brokering the relationships between them. But we're not an apologist for what they do. We'll never advocate their other activities, so it's being very clear about what the nature of the relationship is and how you occupy that space that's really critical. It's like any relationship, they all develop in many different ways, and our job is to look to be an attractive partner, to be visionary, to be aspirational, and to also understand what they will want out of the relationship as well, and try and make a win-win situation. Managing all of those partnerships is a huge challenge in its own right, but it's also part of the excitement of it. And when you look at the NGO partners in particular, we all have different strengths. So Greening Australia is involved in environmental restoration. Bush Heritage is involved in buying and protecting bush, so we have complementary roles there. And the Nature Conservancy has great capacity to bring resources and global attention to what we do. and also bring incredible skills from their organisation to nurture and mentor us, if you like. So it's a very constructive suite of partners, and then the Wilderness Society is also involved, and they're interested in improving the conservation status of some of the vast areas of woodland that currently are not particularly well protected. So a complementary mix of organisations. We've all figured out what we bring to the table and really got on with what we're good at. Well, I guess the beginnings of any bold vision is it starts with a seed somewhere, and there's a particular fellow, Keith Bradby, who has been on this journey from the beginning. He and a number of colleagues who lived on the south coast really understood the value of this area, the importance of it, and they saw that opportunity. And I guess it's the strength of leadership of people like Keith that he was able to tell that story in a compelling way, to articulate a vision that most of us, when we first heard it, said, that's stupid. And then we thought about it and said, well, maybe it's not. And then we said, but it's still really hard. And then we thought, well, what the hell, we'll go anyway. But it was the leadership attributes of a particular individual in the team around him that I guess gave others the confidence and enabled us to help to achieve that vision. I think the nature of leadership is, firstly, you can't go out and demand it. It's a bit of an emergent property, I guess, and I find myself a bit bemused at sometimes people like myself are seen to be leaders when you think you're just getting up every day and doing your job. Things that are important to me in terms of trying to be an effective leader is having that confidence of vision, being clear about what it is you're trying to achieve and being able to articulate that in a compelling way, but also to convince people that it is feasible, that we think if we do pull together that we can achieve things that have never been achieved before. So it's inspiring people to do the extraordinary, if you like, and rather than just living within the frame of the ordinary. I think the real challenge in being a manager is to not necessarily see it as your own role to be the leader as well, and to recognise that leadership can come from all sorts of places. And then when you're working with multiple parties is to acknowledge and create the space for leadership in other institutions as well. It's an extremely difficult thing to do because you have to get that balance between maintaining order in what is a very chaotic world, but also giving everyone opportunities to express themselves and contribute to the process. And it becomes a collective journey rather than the journey of one individual. There's other leadership coming from the Noongar community that's just really inspiring and really impressive and gives us great hope. And the connection between us as environmentalists and the local Indigenous community is quite strong, and it's a shared sense of connection to country, if you like. So we use this phrase that the work we're doing is not only reconnecting country, but it's reconnecting people to country and reconnecting people to people, because there's been a lot of healing happening within the Indigenous community, but also a lot of dialogue between the Wadjulas and Noongars, the whites, and the Aboriginal community. So it's got all of those dimensions, if you like, that makes it quite exciting. One of the things of taking on a big project is you wake up with nightmares quite a bit because there's a lot of risk obviously involved in what we do, and a lot of responsibility that goes with that when you're dealing with lots of people and large budgets and lots of accountability and responsibility. It's challenging. But the real drive is the vision of success always has to stay paramount and take precedence over all of the fears that one obviously has when you take on this sort of a project. Ooh, what feeds me? That's a challenging question. It's hard to know actually. It's really quite daunting sometimes. You get up every morning and you head off and do what you need to do. I think it's a fundamental belief in the importance of the planet that we live in. I guess it's a sense of anger at what we as intelligent human beings have done to a place that, for me at least, is incredibly valuable. And also just the excitement of the challenge of saying, can we make a difference? And it's interesting actually, because you don't actually consciously sit down and say, what is motivating me to do what I do? For some reason it's in our heart, and we just feel that there's an important mission there that we need to strive for. And I guess the other part of me, and this is the intellectual side of me, is that I do believe that there are actually ways in which we can live within the constraints of our natural environment, and I'm interested in using the projects that we work on as models for how we can look to living more appropriately and more sustainably into the future. So there's a combination of the intellectual challenge and a combination of just the passion for what we do.